Welcome back, crazies. This is my van. I call it the General. No, not that General, a different General. The funny thing is, I was never a van guy, but I was always a road trip guy. Some of the happiest memories of my life were when my family would pile into our old RV and drive all over North America to visit relatives and such. My last job before I left Florida was working at a company that, shall we say, made custom interiors that I'm not allowed to show you. And somehow I became their van guy. Well, I fell in love with vans while building out the guts of some of these wagons, both old and new models, so when I started looking for vehicles to carry me and my stuff back across the US after I gave up on looking for a box truck, I started looking for the perfect van. Well, I couldn't afford the perfect van, but this one was close enough. In this video, we're going to do some suspension work on this old tin can, but first let me give you a quick overview of how I got this old beast and the work I've already done on it. I bought the van from a gentleman down in Miami, and though it ran okay, it leaked exhaust like crazy, had no air conditioning because some fool took it out. In Florida. The drive shaft was bent and had the wrong U-joints in it, which caused vibrations at freeway speeds, and there were a few other minor things that it needed for a 3,000-mile trip back out west, including tires. Beatrice was not having it.
No way am I riding in that thing, boss.
Yeah, get over it. So I spent some time and money getting everything fully functional. Some of it I was able to do at work during my lunch break or after hours, including get all of the doors working, and some very temporary body work just to keep it from filling up with water every time it rained. But some I had to have done at my friend's auto shop because neither my condo complex nor my work would let me do it there. One thing I was allowed to do was some cosmetic work and the interior, the front part of the interior anyway. My brother and I were about to take a 3,000-mile trip in this thing, and I wanted it as quiet and cozy as possible, with a few extra bells and whistles. I spent most of the time customizing the headliner because it was just a boring utility version from the factory with a crappy little rectangular dome light. Well, I couldn't have that, so I ordered an overhead console and a map light out of a F-150 of the similar year. It was going to be my new road trip vehicle. It needed a map light because we're old school like that. I spent some time cutting and filling, fiberglassing and trimming. I spent a lot of time reconfiguring and customizing the wiring and electronics because the factory wiring harness wasn't made for most of these things. So I took a few trips to the not-so-local pick and pull to get some of the parts I needed. After all the functional and fanciness work was done, it was time to get serious. Since the day I bought the van, I'd started staging my whole life in a carefully measured area in my dining room floor, and said that if anything didn't fit within this shape, plus a little extra for a small U-Haul trailer, it had to go. So when it came time to load the van, the packing and the loading all seemed to go smoothly, but for one problem. Yep, I'd packed the van too well. I claim a bit of false advertising on the part of the original seller. He listed it as a cargo van, and it was clearly not. It had the factory 3-leaf light-duty springs in it that you'd find in passenger vans. My mistake for not checking. So with literally 24 hours until departure, I drove it back to my buddy's shop and had him install a small 3-inch lift kit. It wasn't much, but it basically restored the ride height back to normal, but the springs were still totally flat. Technical fact, every truck with a solid axle comes with a set of main leaf springs, assuming it has leaf springs, plus one overload leaf, which is usually much thicker. Well, mine was a 3-leaf set of springs, which meant 2 main leaves and 1 overload. That's actually pretty small for a van. The van was sitting on that overload spring the whole way home, so I had to take it really easy. With that statement in mind, I'd like to say, screw you, New Mexico. Get those potholes fixed. In the end, the trip went smoothly. Other than the New Mexico potholes, the van, at least, made it home in one piece, as did the contents. The little U-Haul? Those New Mexico potholes broke the end of the leaf right off the shackle, and U-Haul didn't even care. I just said, pothole, and the guy just shrugged and said, we'll fix it. Now, friends, suspension. Knowing that many of you have clicked on this video because you want to see how to install a block lift kit, but in real life I'm removing an unneeded kit, I'm going to show you the removal in reverse. We're going to make this look like this. I hope you don't get carsick. First thing to do is to chock your wheels if you're on any kind of a slope, and then jack up the vehicle. I was on perfectly flat ground, so no chocks. I'd rather have the van move freely over the jack on level surface than to have the jack move out from under the van because it's fighting the chocks. If you're worried about dropping your vehicle on top of yourself while doing it without chocks, ask yourself, whatever am I doing under a vehicle while I'm jacking it up? Lunacy. I'm only going to show you taking off the passenger side lift kit because as you can see from this clip here, I don't exactly have the best angle and it's already done, so I can't go and reshoot it. I'm not going to put the thing back on just to make a better video. So, yep, on to the next side. The astute among you might have noticed that I have the jack all the way up and putting the jack stands under it, and the wheels are still on the ground. That is because my jack simply doesn't go that high. Neither do my jack stands. They're actually made for cars, not vans. But that's okay. Your Quartermain has a solution. Stay tuned. Here we see Quartermain, who has just removed a 3-inch lift kit and has replaced the U-bolts and is now tightening them down on the spring plate. But like I said, we're playing this in reverse because we're teaching you how to install a lift kit. So don't mind my hand movements. They really do look weird. And if the audio was on, it would sound like I was speaking German right now. But yeah, so you'll notice how I am loosening the bolts incrementally. I'm not just taking, them all off all at once, one at a time, because what that could do is potentially just jam up the spring plate because there's tension on those U-bolts stretch when you tighten them. So if you just loosen one side all at once, then the spring plate will want to jam up in you and it'll just make it harder. So it's a lot easier just to loosen the bolts up incrementally, loosen them, one at a time until you've got them so you can just spin them off with your fingers like that, and then drop out the U-bolt. And then the spring plate will just pop right off. Oh, look at that. Anti-gravity lock washer. Awesome. That just popped right out of my hand. Cool. Okay, so there we go. The spring plate's off, and now we're ready to solve the problem of the wheels sitting on the ground. And here we go. For those of you who didn't notice, that's the jack that I just put right on the leaf spring with the spring plate as kind of a spacer. But wasn't that the smoothest jack operation you've ever seen in your whole life? It's because, as I said, I'm playing it backwards. That was me letting the jack down with the valve and not jacking it up. So enjoy. Okay, so now that right there is actually a shim. It's an angled shim, 2 degrees. And the reason you have those is because when you lift, when you do like an axle lift like this, it changes the angle of the pumpkin or the yoke on the drive shaft, and you use those because you want the output shaft of the transmission and the yoke on the pumpkin to be at the same angle. So you use these shims to set the angle on the pumpkin so that they're at the same, at the same angle. Because if you don't have them at the same angle, what you'll get is vibrations, because then the universal joints at each end will they won't be out of phase, but they'll be arguing with each other. It's kind of hard to explain. But so there you see me, I put in the shim, and actually I took out the shim and the block, and now I'm sitting it down, lowering the jack. Actually, I'm jacking up the jack, but you're seeing it lower down, one pump at a time, back down, putting the leaf spring on the block, and boom, there we go. Here I am removing the U-bolts and the spring plate, but you're actually seeing me put them back on, so let's just go with that. That other U-bolt was actually stuck onto the axle when I took the spring plate off because it just had enough miles on it and enough strain that it just kind of wedged itself on there. So it was kind of convenient, didn't drop, didn't make a bunch of noise, because strictly speaking, I wasn't supposed to be doing this in my condo driveway, so I had to be really quiet, which is why I was using hand tools and not like a ratchet or, air tools or anything like that. So yeah, here we are. We got the new U-bolts in, the new crusty old U-bolts, and we're putting the lock washers and the nuts on. So when you're putting the nuts on, you want to treat this just like a wheel, like lug nuts. You want to put them on, not in a special pattern, although, there's no harm in doing that, but you want to do it incrementally, and you want to have them be the same. You actually want to torque it down so that they're the same spec, because you need the spring plate to sit flush. You want the pressures on the spring plate to be level, with parallel with the block that it's sitting on the axle, because if it's uneven, it causes extra strain on one U-bolt compared to the other, and then you could have a broken U-bolt would result, and that wouldn't be good. Flying down the freeway, for one thing, the person behind you get a U-bolt in the teeth, and another thing, you'd suddenly have possibly a major repair going on with your van upside down in a ditch. But yeah, so you got to put them on incrementally, like I said, torque them down. Each U-bolt will have a different spec, like each size. It's based on the thickness. I'm not going to go over torque specs right now because mine are different size U-bolts than yours are probably. These are just kind of the factory thickness. So I'd basically go to the factory spec. So you guys don't need to worry about that. Google it, find out, when you get your U-bolts, figure out what thickness they are. Google the torque spec on them, or call your local truck shop. They'll probably be able to tell you. And then tighten them down properly. You may notice my hands are shaking like crazy in this video, and I'll tell you this, like I've said before, I just moved from Florida, and I lived in a condo complex there, and Florida freaking homeowners associations, they're evil. If you step off with the wrong foot off of the elevator, somebody's going to complain about it. And so I was basically seriously hampered in the kind of work I was allowed to do to my own cars. Like, I changed my oil once or twice and I got all kinds of stink eye. It was just not fun. And so I wasn't able to really do a whole lot of wrenching. And so my wrenching muscles now, 10 years later, are so worn out. And so me crawling under this van and using the muscles it takes to turn these wrenches and to pull off these things and to screw these the nuts down in and all that, it just wore me out really fast. So my hands started shaking really early on in the video. Although you'll see them shake less and less as this video progresses, since it's being played in reverse. But when I was showing you the shim earlier, yeah, my hands were shaking. Like it looked like a video glitch. I was shaking so much. But yeah, so that's my excuse, sticking to it. So the kit's basically in at this point. While you have the thing up in the air and the axle is lower than its normal ride height, you check the flexible brake hoses to make sure that they're not too tight. You might need to get longer ones to accommodate the extra travel in your axle, or at least the extra, it being further away from the chassis. And then just put your wheels on, clean your tools and put them away, pull out your fancy cardboard drop cloth, remove your jack stands, and lower the car down. Enjoy your fancy new ride height. My mean machine may not show it, but there are a few pieces that wore out during our nearly non-stop 3,000-mile trip. To get the general 100% roadworthy again, we'll call it Phase 1. And here is our status. Thank you for watching. I have been your host. I am Quartermain. Don't forget to like and subscribe and ring that bell. And as always, be excellent to each other. Don't sweat the small stuff, and remember that God loves you, and so do I.